Welcome back to the Soul Collective podcast. My guest this week is Natalie Miles, who is a channeler for the collective, psychic medium, writer, speaker, and host of the top spiritual podcast on iTunes, So You Think You're Intuitive. It is her mission to make intuition accessible and be the door opener for others to connect to their intuition. Natalie, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's awesome. I'm so pleased we get to have this conversation together.
Yeah, so am I. We were chatting a little bit before we got started, and it's really cool because a lot of our listeners listen to your podcast as well. So there's a lot of, fun crossover there. And I know a lot of people are probably familiar with you and the incredible work that you're doing. But for those who are maybe not as familiar, could you share a little bit about you and what you're up to in the world?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I always find it's like everyone's like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, it's so difficult to kind of label as well at the same time. So I'm a psychic medium, I'm a writer. I just launched my first book last year. You're Intuitive, a podcast host, and what I'm really enjoying and where my work is really guiding me right now is is the channeling. I channel like energy forecasts monthly and yearly for like what the energy is for the month, and I share kind of the energy of like what we're experiencing each week as well. And so that part of my work is really getting a lot louder. So yeah, I'm going to be doing a lot more of that and sharing much more. But it's all been of how, for me, it's what's really coming through, especially in a year of like 2021, is really like it's your truth, and it's a reminder that I'm not the teacher, you are. Like, and so all my work is really being guided back to that element of how can I guide people and be that door opener to guide people to receive their own channeled information, for them to tap into their own intuition, and for us to remember and realize that we have access to these gifts. We just need to kind of remember how and put us back into that state of being able to receive that guidance, especially when the world is doing its thing right now, and it can feel really daunting and overwhelming at times.
Yeah, I absolutely love your energy forecasts. And, I love that the message that's coming through right now is it's your truth, and really, claiming that self-sovereignty, I think, is so, so important. And so I want to get into like what's coming up right now. Like, what are you reading into for, this time that we're in right now? And one of the things that I find really interesting, because I've listened to many of your energy forecasts, is like just how much they correlate with the astrology of what's happening as well. Do you tune into astrology as well, or?
Yeah, it's fascinating because I always like to say it always comes from the same, it all comes from the same source. And so I love astrology, big astrology fan. But what's fascinating is that I will kind of channel through the energy theme of what it is. And then like the astrology comes through and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that fits with that. And I'll like pick out key months of the year. Like I can't remember. I picked out some key months of this year, and I've had astrologers be like, well, yeah, of course it is, Nat. It's because of this, this, and this, and this. And I'm like, oh, right. Okay. And it's fascinating. Like I'll do it with my own chart as well, where I don't realize where I am in my own chart. And I'll be like, oh, I think my key months this year are going to be X, Y, and Z. And then I go and have an astrology reading, and they're like, oh yeah, it's because you're picking up on this transit and this thing. And that's what I love about it, is because we then realize how all this stuff comes from the same source. It comes from the same place. It's just a different way of how we read the energy or the planets or what we're experiencing. But it also makes us really remember and realize how connected energetically we actually are. And that's awesome as well, because I love that. And that's my especially with the energy forecast, as you say, like I get messages from people around the world being like, it's like you're talking to me. It's like everything that you're sharing is like that, it's personal. And I shared this recently on my Instagram, like, I need this information just as much as you do. Like this chat, like I'll be in the middle of the month, I mean, like, oh my God, what, this, all of this stuff's happening. And I'm like, what did the channeled energy forecast say? And I'll go back and listen. And when I channel it, it 9 times out of 10, like none of it really resonates with what's happening in my own life. And then I listen back in the middle of the month and I'm like, oh shit. Oh yeah, okay. I can see how this resonates with me. Oh yeah. And so it is this amazing, yeah, blend. And that's why I love doing it, because it does show us how connected we all are to ourselves, and what's happening in the collective.
Yeah, totally. I know. And it's interesting to go back, because I was going back to like your 2020 forecast and just how much stuff really resonates. So for anybody that is really nerdy into astrology like I am, could you share your sun, your rising, and your
Yeah.
moon sign?
Yeah, I'm a Leo sun, Virgo rising with a Cancer moon.
Ah, love it. Love it.
Yeah,
I'm a
yeah,
Virgo rising, and then I have a water sign as my moon as well. So
right. Bringing in that intuition. It's like, and I think the Virgo rising is also, for me, it's all very much like how the body is and how we channel it through the body, and how the body's really, really important. And I'm just getting that intuitive that the body's really, really important for you as well. Okay, I'm just like,
yeah,
and how we move through the energy through the body is so important, and that's a really big part of this year. And in fact, it's the 20 the February energy forecast theme is, because I already have it, is your body. So February is
wow.
all going to be about the body and how we use our body, health, how we the everything to do with the body, whether it's also like our human body, but also like the home space, and what does the body represent across lots of different ways. So yeah, I'm about
Wow.
to channel through this week. But yeah, it's the theme for February is the body.
The body. That's so interesting. I love that because we can, speaking for myself, we can get so out of our body at some points
Mhm.
in time and just remembering to come back home and on a daily basis be really present in the body is such a great practice.
Mm.
Um, Natalie, can you share a little bit about your forecast for this year overall?
Yeah. So 2021, it's all about your truth. And so it's all about how you're practicing discernment around what your truth looks like, whether it's about how you take the learnings that you learned from 2020 and you put them into action, as well. Like that's really, really important to do. It's about how we show up with authenticity, how we show up with the masks down. It's really about how we communicate our truth, and also being really flexible with our truth, because I think we can get really we can get really fixed on what our truth means for us. And so it's also this being adaptable and being like, oh, you know what the truth was for me last month, as I've evolved and grown, and I've received new information from the collective. Actually, this is not doesn't feel heart aligned for me anymore, and I need to be adaptable in my truth as well. So it's going to be a big year of practicing discernment around also what you're listening to in the news, on social media, and being ask the questions, do the research, but also looking like, how does this fit with my truth? And that can bring up a lot for people, but I think it's a really expansive year, but it's also going to be a year of really dropping into that like self-sovereignty energy, which was the energy theme of 2020 was self-sovereignty. And so it's basically like it's a build up. So it's like, just because we did the learning last year on what self-sovereignty was, or we began to see what self-sovereignty was, like this year it's like it's still just as important for us to keep practicing the self-sovereignty, but also really blending that with like the self-sovereignty and your truth, and how that fits and how that flows across like your personal life, your business life, or your relationships, and also what's coming through in the collective as well.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because when I hear you talk about your truth, and then I just think about our collective North Node right now is in the sign of Gemini, and it's like this understanding that there is multiple different truths, and being, being accepting of the fact that everybody has their own truth, and also like really honing in on what your personal truth is.
Completely, and being okay that sometimes the mission isn't to get everyone to have the same truth. We're never going to achieve that as human beings on this planet. And so this complete need for everyone to kind of be in this, like, this is the truth. It's like, well, we're always going to have a version of our own truth. But it's about how we can learn and educate ourselves. And because that's also really important, this kind of not being shut off. It's about learning and educating and adapting, and as you say, acknowledging that different people are going to have different truths.
Exactly. Yeah, I've heard you talk about this year as the energy moving very quickly, perhaps much, quicker than 2020, the previous year. Yeah, and a lot of, personal resets. Like what might that look like?
So I just from the start of January already, for me personally, I've just really noticed, and friends and people I've been talking to within the community, and just my my own stuff. Yeah, it just feels like we're being asked to move through things really quickly. Like it just feels like the energy's moving through really fast, and the opportunity is there to like for something to come up, for the healing to present itself, for it to be like moved out of our energy field. So whether it's like, nope, that relationship's not right, boom, gone. Friendships, appearing, and then it's suddenly being like, actually that thing that's been around for a while, nope, they're going to. Or something coming up in work, it's like, oh, this needs to be dealt with, and it needs to be dealt with like now. It feels like we're really being asked in the front half of this year. And part of this, your truth, is to get really clear on your values. Like, what are your values? Like, what do you actually want in your life? Like, what do you want that to look like? Whether it's like, what do I want my home to look like? What do I want my relationship status to look like? On all levels, even like how you show up for yourself in your spiritual practice, or how you start your day or your morning routine. It's really getting clear on like, what are those values and visions that keep me really aligned to me, that feels really important, and what am I doing to support myself in my own truth during all of this? Because someone asked me the other day on an Instagram live, they were like, when can I expect more calm in the collective? When is there going to be more calm? And I had to really kind of honestly say, I was like, this is ongoing. If you're waiting for the calm in the collective to happen, or for things to dial back a bit, we're going to be waiting a while. So this is about like bringing it back to us and being like, well, how can I find peace, and how can I find calm in myself, and in what I'm doing and how I'm showing up? Because that is going to be so important.
I love that you just share that. Yeah, because I know a lot of people are like, oh, I just can't wait for things to get back to normal and, be calm again. And I do feel like, there might be more challenges that we go through collectively. And it really does depend on our personal state, in terms of how we navigate and how those changes feel like for all of us.
Yeah. And being okay with things not being okay. Like, I really feel like sometimes people are like, oh, Nat, so does this mean you have all your shit together? Like, you're just, yeah, I can channel, I can receive all this information and everything's fine. It's like, no, like I was saying to someone the other day, I was like, I'm currently living in the middle of nowhere, single, alone, in kind of no house, no stable home. Like, I have so many moving parts right now in my own life. And I'm like, do I feel overwhelmed at times? Yes. Do I get anxiety? Yes. Am I sometimes thinking like, what am I doing? Like, what is spirit? Why am I doing all of this? I'm like, yeah. And it's such a human, like, we have to remember that even though we identify as spiritual, we're human beings experiencing human emotions, and having these tools to be able to practice and connect to our intuition, or learn how to receive channeled information and act on it. Like, that's all there, and that's there to support us. But we also have to remember that it's okay to feel those human emotions, and we have those things to help and guide us on the journey.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful thing to share, you know, because, and I love how you brought up the masks earlier on. It's like in those moments of vulnerability and in sharing and not feeling like we have to, you know, put on you know, a mask of everything being perfect or fine, and being in the truth of that. There is so much beauty there.
Yeah, so much. And I think it then, I think this level of vulnerability is interesting. Like, I'm like backdating, and someone asked me on like a dating app, they were like, what are your things? And I was like, for me, it's like communication and vulnerability. Like, in the end, like, that's it. If you're looking to have that, and not just in a romantic partnership, in business relationships, in friendships, and in all of it, because, or if anything, what's happening in the world, it's showing us this need to be vulnerable, like this need to be vulnerable. And every single one of us is moving through something on a daily basis, and with everything that's happening in the collective right now, that just feels extra heightened because we are moving through everything. So this state of allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and be like, do you know what, I'm having a really difficult day and I'm actually feeling these emotions, is a game changer. And then give that vulnerability so important, and then giving ourselves the opportunity to be like, okay, and now I'm ready to move through that. Now I'm ready to use the tools to make me, for me to remember that my energy is really important, and for my energetic self-sovereignty is important, and I need to clear my energy to be able to feel good. Like, it's a game changer. So yeah, vulnerability and energetic self-sovereignty and all the things in between.
Oh my God, so much. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things I think, is that we don't have safe spaces to feel like the depth of the human experience that we go through, you know, and it is, I see that opening up in ways that will allow us to heal on a greater level. For you, when you tune in, are there like specific months that you feel like more stuff is going to come up, or there, you know, will be more pivotal months for us this year?
Yeah, great question. I'm like, what did I say in my energy forecast? Because this is what happens, it goes blank on what I channeled through. November feels really big. April, July, yeah, there's some really big. Honestly, February is really big too. So February 2021 is a big one energetically as well. So honestly, I mean, every month I'm like, wow, this is a big energy month. And I say that because, and it's interesting, from when I first started doing these, they weren't always like, this is a big energy month. But it's interesting since I've been doing these for the last like 2.5, 3 years, how the energy has been really building. And so this is very much it's a key thing, just to really keep dropping back into you, into how you feel and what that looks like, and and just being like, okay, I'm getting myself prepped and ready to be able to do that, to navigate that. And it's interesting because I've just channeled through, like, it's called The Doorway. It's really funny. It's been around for a couple of years and I've never published it because it just didn't feel like the right time. And I've got this like big intuitive hit. It's like, no, it needs to come out. Like, let's launch it. And what it is, and I've started using them too in my own morning practice, that I've been really find like helpful. And they're basically like they're channeled forecast, like channeled energy messages, or channeled things over different topics, like open heart, letting go, collective hope, emotional body reset. And so I've been using them in my own daily practice to start the day, because I've just been like, oh my God, I need to like get back in my body, or do you know what, I need to trust myself a little bit more. And there's one called Trust Yourself. And for me, those have been like, and then in my own personal practice has been really transformational, just in me dropping in so that I can then receive like the guidance that I need for that day. Like, I've been finding that that's been like really, really powerful and potent. So yeah, but I just think it's just going to be a big year. It's going to be a big couple of years.
Yes. I have so many questions for you. So I want to ask, I know that um, discovered your intuitive gifts at an early age. Was it always something that you really cultivated and tuned into, or was there like a period of time where you kind of shut off from your gifts? Like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I went to my first ever like psychic circle where I to share messages when I was 16. And my mum was going and she was like, "Hey Nat, do you want to join me?" And I remember being like, I don't know if I'll be able to do it, but yeah, sure, why not? Let's go. And so that was the first time I really realized I could give messages to people. I've always, as a kid, been open or seen spirits or, um, had crazy dreams and things like that. But at age 16 was the first time that I really realized that I could share messages with other people. And then honestly, it was kind of on lockdown, really. Like there were a couple of times in my early 20s where it came out at university and I had some interesting experiences there. And then it just, with having a career, I used to work in film for 10 years. Having a career partner like that wouldn't have been accepting with this stuff, like everything just kind of went into shutdown. And it wasn't until I moved to Canada in my early 30s that everything kind of opened up and I went back to doing more learning in circles. And suddenly it was like, oh yeah, like this feels like me. And then a mentor at the time was like, "You do know you're going to be doing this full time, right?" And I was like, "No, no, no, no." And then obviously everything transpired and hey, here we are. um, but it's definitely been a journey. It's not as if I've been like, doing it since I was 16 or in my 20s and being open and practicing and doing all that. That just kind of, that wasn't the journey. It's been just a real kind of going through my own spiritual activation and then suddenly being like, oh yeah, like, oh, this world, this now makes sense. So yeah, that's a bit of the journey.
Yeah, it's really inspiring to hear you say that because I know, like, for me, my personal path, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, is like really discovering later on, and tapping into, some of those gifts. And I know one of the things that I love about you is that you are helping people to activate and reconnect with their own innate gifts, which you believe everybody has. And, do you think that, if it's, 3, 4, 5, 6 decades, where you're like haven't connected to that, do you feel like it's harder to do in some ways? Or like, what has your experience been with that?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because I think when it's supposed to happen, it's supposed to happen. And I write about this in the book is like we want to control when we have a spiritual activation or when our intuitive gifts come on, like we want to control it. And sometimes it can be like, when is this gonna happen? And sometimes we just have to kind of surrender up that it all happens in the right way. For example, like I've had clients that are like, I really want to be able to hear messages. I really want to be able to hear it. And it takes a while. And then when it's ready to come through, they're like, oh wow, my hearing gift has started, or oh my God, I can see stuff now. And I think it's about doing the development around it and but also believing and trusting that you do have access to those gifts as well. Like I describe it that we're always like, it's like a spectrum of light. Like we're always receiving all of the ways to receive the messages, where it's hearing, seeing, feeling, or knowing. Like we all have access to that full spectrum. But it might just be that we only receive the guidance through like feeling or knowing, but the seeing and the hearing is there. It's just that your body hasn't calibrated to be able to that portal's not open yet. And so that's the journey, and the guidance is that it's there, and you will and when the timing is right, that you will receive those messages in that way too.
What are some helpful tips to really begin to tap into some of those
Yeah.
gifts?
um I think one of the main ones is like the slowing down and the pausing and the noticing. It really is like when we're rushing around from A to B, we can really miss the signs and signals, and we forget that our whole body is intuitive, bringing it back to the body. It's not just relying on signs or seeing the stuff in the external world. Our body, our intuitive body, is always communicating, whether it's like, you know, the tightness across the chest that you suddenly might feel, or you're getting like tingles up your arms, or you know, you feel the brush of a wind. Like it's all about like how your body feels as well, not just like, oh, I'm gonna see something or I'm gonna rely on some external sign. So just pausing and noticing and slowing down is really, really important. And the other thing I will say is, like, if you're someone that knows that you're getting messages and you're just jumping onto Google to ask what your messages mean, you're really missing something that's, and for you to remember that that's like a deeply connected message for you personally. And so if you receive something, whether it's in a dream or you see a sign and you're like, what does that animal mean? Or what does that number mean? Like, just stop and pause and ask yourself, like, what does it mean to me? What does it mean to me? Because those messages are like whispers from your spirit team, from source, the universe, God, whatever you want to label it as. They're whispers for you. So give them the benefit of the doubt by asking, what does it mean to me, before like jumping onto Google.
That's such good advice. I've definitely been guilty of that sometimes.
Me too. And at least sometimes if it's like you don't know what it means, then, and you're like, oh, I'm still stuck, then go onto Google or ask an intuitive, or, but don't just do that as like the first thing that you do, because you can follow the trail. Like in the book, I call it like how you follow the trail. It's like, ask what it means to you, and then be like, and then ask yourself, like, what area of my life does this relate to? And I bet you'll be able to say like, oh yeah, it's because of this, and it relates to, you know, this work thing, or this relationship drama, or something with money, or whatever that's coming up. And then you'll be like, okay. And then the next step is really trusting and taking the action, because that is, people always say to me, and my friends included always say, Nat, what's special about you is that you will actually take action on the messages. Like, you'll get them, but you actually like listen and you do something about it. And I think that's also part of my work and my mission, is that so many people are getting the messages and the guidance, but they don't trust what they're getting, so they then don't take action.
I think that's so key. Yeah. And when I was reflecting, like preparing for this conversation, I was kind of thinking back, and like there was a period of time in my life where I was like so disconnected from my intuition. And it was like, first of all, in sort of like a fight or flight, like go, go, go type of, you know, routine. And then also like I was getting intuitive hits, but I was just completely ignoring them at the time. So I think that's so key, because it's like almost like a muscle, right? That you strengthen over time, the more that you listen and tap into and trust that knowing. But tell us, like, what would you say is the difference between like your ego, or like the thinking mind, and hearing that voice versus like your intuition?
Yeah, I have a couple of ways I like to describe it. The most simple is that the intuitive message will come in, give the message, and it will disappear. So it will come into your mind, into your thoughts, or however you receive it, and then it will disappear. It won't like play out round and round and round and round and round in your head. Like, so like an ego voice that's like, you should do this, you must do this. And we can get this like, the ego voice can also feel like comes from the front of the mind. So it can feel like this chatter that's like chat, 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 chat. That's also distinguishing whether like, is this my intuition talking? It's like, no, the intuitive voice will come in and disappear, and the ego will just keep like moving everything around the head, like your mind space. The intuitive voice can also feel like it comes from the back of the head. So it will feel like it comes from the back. Again, the ego voice coming from the front versus it being chattery. And also, again, yeah, like the ego voice will come in with like, should, you must do this. And it also can come through like, I need an answer now. Like, I need this and I need this now. Versus the intuitive voice can feel not logical. It might not have a time frame. and it can also feel really guiding, like your best, like someone guiding you. There might be a particular tone to it as well. So yeah, those are some great ways. And just also noticing like how things feel in your body. A lot of the time people are like, well, how do I know the difference between my anxiety and my intuition? Like the ego is one thing, but what about the anxiety voice? And sometimes I like to then describe it, it's like people are like, what's the difference? And I'm like, well, if you're receiving that intuitive guidance and you get the intuitive hit and then it disappears, and then the anxiety kicks in because you've just received the intuitive message and now you're worried because now you have to take the guidance on it. Like, listen to that, because it's a great way to distinguish between the anxiety and the intuition. Being like, are you anxious because you received the guidance and now you have to take action? Or are you just in a state of anxiety because of you just had a phone call with someone and they gave you some news, or you just went onto social media and you're stressed out? Like, and it's really kind of practicing that discernment.
Yes, yeah, that's such a great point. You know, one of the things also that I love about you is like that you have these courses and workshops and tools to help people really cultivate. Because one of the things that like I hear, and I'm sure you do too, is like, oh, I want to channel these collectives, and I want to, do an energy reading and stuff like that. And sometimes we feel like it should be like instantaneous, and if we don't have that gift right away, that we're not intuitive or we're not, psychic. And I feel like it does take time, especially, if it's been a while where you're kind of like those gifts are dormant, to be able to reconnect with them and practice and nurture them. Like what have you found to be true?
Yeah, like things take time and practice. Like as you said earlier, it's a muscle. Like the more you practice, the more you'll receive. And so it's this blend of like, we have to be invested into it and be open to what we want to receive as well. So yeah, which is why like I created my intuitive community, which is why I created all the workshops and tools, and honestly my book, You're Intuitive, Trust Your Truth, Take Back Your Power, is basically like why we need our intuition now in this planet of with everything we're experiencing. Is like, we need to use our intuition to practice discernment. Like, we're going to need our intuition to be able to discover our truth. And so it's a book on like why you need to connect your intuition for everything that's happening on the planet.
Yes, I love that. Do you have any fun stories of like when people are really like more in the logical, linear, part of their brain, and kind of like shifting over some of the breakthroughs that have taken place?
Oh wow, there are so many. I'm just trying to think of one that jumps out. Um, of people. I'm just wondering if there's more of like my stuff. Um, it's a really great question. I don't have any like particular stories of particular people. I mean, there are so many that of in the intuitive community where people are like, oh, like I asked for this and it happened, or I received this message from, like, I had this dream and I got this and I was connected, or I received this intuitive hit and then I got offered the job the next day of what, I was told I should go and do this. Like, people are always sending intuitive hits into the podcast, which is what I love. Like, for
Yeah.
example, like there was this woman who wanted to get her Italian citizenship, and she was an American, and she needed to know the date. They couldn't find the birth certificate of like her great grandmother or something, and they really needed it. And so she was like, from this tiny town, and so I remember her, she sent in this thing, and like there's a tiny Italian town, and she had to find like all these paperwork, and her grandmother or great grandmother visited her in a dream and told her the date, to look at the date of, or like, and it was like it was like early 1900s or even like 18 something. And she got this dream and she received the piece of information, and she like put it into the Italian, like wrote them and said, well, they were like, we don't know where to start. And she's like, well, look in these folders. And boom, there it was. And she managed to find the birth certificate of her grandmother, and then it all happened. And yeah, I was like, it's small stories like that, where or people being able to connect to loved ones that have passed over, and then they realize that there's more to this world than just what's around us. Like it's powerful. Like it's even for me personally, I have a habit of bumping into people, or like snail trails of people, like people I'll meet, like know people of other people. Like it's very I love realizing that we co-create what are you what's that what's what's
Yeah.
happening, and the people, and we think that we're like bumbling along, not having a plan, and then these moments that happen and that you're just like, wow, like I'm on some like divine path and this plan that's there, and I don't realize. And as much as I'm trying to control things, and I think I'm trying to control things, am I actually really? Because those special magic moments um just make you realize, like, wow, like this world and this planet is incredible and amazing.
Yeah, it's so true. It's like that being able to tune into that is like a whole
Mm.
nother level of appreciation. For myself personally, I was a part of a small psychic development circle, and it was such a life transforming experience. And now I sort of integrate in energy readings into my intuitive business. And it's like at first I was like, oh, this is silly. Like I'm not going to share it. And it's one of the things that like my clients absolutely love. And I
Mhm.
never would have guessed that I would, have that gift or be able to connect in that way.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful, and it is that like, and as you know, it's like trusting it, even if it makes no sense to you. And it's like, this feels really weird, and I keep getting this message or this image, and this makes no sense to me. But when you share it, and they're like, oh, yeah, it's because of X, Y, and Z. You're like, oh, thank goodness I shared. Like, especially when I was first starting, it was like there's that fear of like, am I making this up? What if it's wrong? And then, but we have to share. Like, I really encourage people to share, and obviously ask permission to share the message first. But it's so beautiful to witness the receiving of a message when it does have that impact, and it does is that like it can, it's really transformational.
Yeah, I want to ask you a bit about ancestor healing,
Mm.
because I know that's something that you work with a lot, and just how some of those like wounds or blocks can be sort of passed down generationally.
Yeah, yeah, it's I love this part of my work in my client sessions, where it's like we begin to see, and you can do this journey on your own as well, where we begin to identify the patterns and themes and blocks that get passed from our ancestors. And when I say ancestors, it's not just your immediate family, parents, grandparents, great grandparents. It's also before that as well. And then we don't realize how much we're playing out unconsciously in our lives that is part of their stories. And so when we bring it up to the surface and we realize that, oh shit, I'm repeating this same pattern in a different way to try and learn from it, and I'm being given an opportunity to heal it. And when we begin to see like these golden threads that like, piece us all together, it's like, whoa. And then you get a chance to heal it and move on from it, and look at, what your own personal story is. And it's something for me personally, which is and for everyone, like it's ongoing. Once you discover part of your ancestor story, or one of the themes and the blocks and the patterns, and you're like, oh yeah, cool, I've moved on from that. It's like, yeah, beware when you say, yeah, I'm done with that, because it will just cut. It's ongoing work. It really is ongoing work. But I love to be able to do it, and it's one of my gifts in my own channeling of on my one-on-one sessions or group sessions, where it's like, this happened to you age 17, and it's connected to your ancestor story, and I bet your mum also suffered something like this, and your grandmother, and people are like, oh shit, yeah, I've never seen it like that before. And it really kind of unlocks that pattern, just by talking about it and bringing it up to the surface.
Yeah, I bet. What if you're not like super familiar with your ancestor story? What would you
Yeah.
recommend?
I If you have a relationship where you can ask parents or family members, or even like friends that were friends of your parents or grandparents, and ask them like, what do you think your life learning has been on this planet. What have you had to face as a child? Like, what have they had to face, you know, in their own family dynamic, within their own relationships, within their own, you know, finding their person, finding their purpose, or what work means to them, or what was their relationship around money, or what was the dealing with health. Like, if you can start to kind of look at what they had to face around those key topics, it can really help you unlock why you feel a certain way, whether you know, it might make sense of like, wow, this makes sense, well, I feel abandoned, or I struggle with home, or I have this thing around money. If you look back, it's amazing the amount of people who I do client sessions with where they have a really big money block, or there's something a lot around money, and then it comes through and spirit tell me like, oh, well, that person, their grandparent lost a load of money, like they had everything and they lost everything. And it's amazing that we when we kind of piece together the dots of like that particular, you know, especially around money, it's really fascinating how it then plays out going forward. But if you can also do this work if you're adopted. So you can also look at, even if you don't know who your biological family are, you can also do this with your adopted parents, because you're then also taking on the ancestor story of your adopted parents as and your adopted family or caregivers as well. So it doesn't just have to be immediate family, it can be caregivers as well. So yeah, and in my ancestor story workshop that I have, I also guide people through like these visualizations, guided meditations, so that you can discover this information too. So it's not just off of like, oh, I'm going to rely off the stories of that I'm receiving. Like, you can also do it from like the energy and just of what comes through in these visualizations and guided meditations as well, which is super powerful and awesome.
So powerful. What are some other like common blocks that show up?
Dimming our light, that's a real big one right now, of like not wanting to be seen and heard, and how there's this real energy right now where we're all really being called to step forward and be seen and heard. And so it's about really looking at the kind of the block and the theme and the pattern ancestrally around that, especially with women. That's really loud right now.
Oh
women.
yeah. Yeah.
It's really loud.
It's so funny that you bring that up. It's I spoke with an intuitive a while ago about my podcast and the show, and she was like, you know, you're allergic to public speaking. Which I thought was so funny. But you know, it's something that, you know, many of us are working through, you know, in our own ways. And so
yeah, it's huge. And also self-worth, like there's stuff around self-worth and like the feeling like we deserve love, or we deserve receiving, or we deserve to be heard and seen. Like there's a lot, you know, we're really kind of working through a lot in the heart space around self-worth, especially as we're like bringing it back to where we are right now energetically, like your truth, and like really looking at our vision and our values and what we need. That element of self-worth is really being brought up, because for a lot of us, we don't feel worthy of having the things that we want. We don't feel worthy to be heard and seen, and we don't feel worthy to be like, I really want that partner, or I really want that, and feeling like we're worthy enough of having it, if I can get my words out. But yeah, there are so many and even stuff to do with ancestor stories around like I went through a phase, like lost children. So if children were like lost, or like miscarriage, or things, or there was abortion, or things, like how the loss of children through the generations then really affect the woman that's there, or being a mother, or their relationship to motherhood. Like it's really fascinating how that comes up as well, where it's like how lost children from previous generations really affect people currently without them realizing as well, around like motherhood. I always find those sessions are really really deep and insightful when they come up too.
Do you recommend that people tap into past lives?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big past life fan, like, and I know people are really intrigued by it. I hosted an online past life circle a couple of months ago, and it was like really, really popular. Yeah, I mean, I love past lives. I think people can get a bit too hung up on them as well, or make excuses for what's happening in their own life right now, being like, oh, well, it's because it happened in a past life. It's like, okay, let's not spiritually bypass and just say, just because this happened in a past life, that now that gives me permission to, it's great and it's awesome, but just notice if you're someone that's like, fixated on what happened on a past life versus being like, okay, what's the learning for me now in this present moment? Because I know that sometimes once we open that kind of past life portal of wanting to discover them, it's amazing, and it can be really deeply, it's a real deep healing journey, and they can be so transformational when you heal them and move past them. But just also notice if you're someone that's blaming stuff all the time on a past life.
Yeah, that's really good advice. You know, one of the things that I learned is like when I tapped in, it was like some of the more painful, like traumatic lives. And I was like, oh, well, why is this, you know?
Right? It's like, yeah, I think everyone has this expectation of like, oh, I'm being taken back to Egypt and I was a queen, or like, I think everyone, and sometimes you hear like, so I would also be really wary if you're going to someone who's doing a past life reading and they're just giving you like these top level kind
You're
of
a priestess. And
like, you were a high priest, exactly, you were a high priestess, or you know, you were a singer in a jazz bar, like, just yeah, be aware of that, because the real deep past life regressions are doing it, the lives will be really simple, and you will be shown the really simple lives, whereas you, and also, as you said, the more shadowy ones, that, you know, the way you experience the pain and the loss, and what that looks like.
yeah. And I've learned to look at that as sort of like a gift too, as like
Yeah.
it's coming up to be healed, to be looked at because you're ready, you know?
Yeah, those shadow ones are the those are the beautiful, that's the where the beauty is, like, and we're being asked more than ever before to look at the shadow, to look at the pain, to look at the suffering, to really understand it and identify it and heal from it, versus being like, I'm just going to keep pushing this down and pretend it doesn't exist. It's like, oh, and that's where we are in the collective. So as you know, we're now not being given an opportunity to push down, you know, oppression, racism, everything that's coming up in society. You know, we have to look at it. There has to be change. And that's also happening on the micro with our personal lives, where it's like we're being asked, there's no option. We got to look at the shadow on all levels, in our personal lives and the collective.
Yes. So, so true. Natalie, for you, do you have any personal rituals that you do? Like, do you use a pendulum or oracle cards or like anything
Yeah.
like that? Or
I really kind of go with the flow with it, of what really feels really good. I don't have a like a definitive set practice. I will pull cards for myself in the morning if it feels really good. I'm back using I'm starting using these doorway activations, which I've really, really enjoyed. And I have this like binaural beats music track that I love listening to. I love binaural beats to like really drop me in. It just really gives me that flow. I don't use a pendulum. I used to use a pendulum a lot, but then I found that I was really good at changing the pendulum for what I want, the answer for what I wanted. To be honest, you have to really get out of your way of a pendulum. And I was like, no, okay, I'm not using a pendulum anymore. I was like, this isn't what I'm using. But I love, yeah, when I feel cool, tarot cards. I mean, kind of was new to tarot in my early 30s and got my first deck, and yeah, I like tarot or oracle. And mainly for me, it's just I love moving. I get the best messages when I'm moving my body. So it's like, how if I'm moving energy through my body, I'll, you know, get those intuitive hits or those things, and really bring it back into that form and space.
yeah, yeah. Um, I'm so curious to ask you because, like, you know, you have to be like sort of open to energy? And have you ever had the experience where you like really had to work on like strengthening your boundaries or like protection? Was that
Every
ever?
day, every day. It is a daily practice. I think, you know, I can channel till the cows come home. I can be doing this work full time. I can be a leader or teacher guide in this space. But I think every day I'm having to be like, what are my boundaries? Have I cleared my energy field? Have I had that salt bath? Is there anyone hooking into my energy? Like, I know all the practices, I know how to do it, but it's also remembering, and also making it like, for me, that's now non-negotiable. Like, I have to be doing it because I am so sensitive, and just showing up in the work that I'm doing, and channeling, and everything. But we're all highly sensitive, we're all empaths, and so having that, like, that need to set energetic boundaries and physical boundaries, um it's tough. Like, it's not the easiest of things to do all the time, but we have to be open to receive and show up for people, and create the boundaries, and energetic do the energetic clearings and everything too. So yeah, it's a daily ongoing. It's definitely a daily ongoing. And hey, and I still have my own energy clearings. Like, I will go to people to support me, and I talk about this in the book, where it's like, you can learn to clear your energy all the time, and that's great, but we also sometimes need the support and assistance and guidance of other people to support us to clear our energy as well, for things that we're not seeing. So there are
Mhm.
people that I go to help me clear my energy field. And um I'm being called to say this, and even though we're in a pandemic and people can't, connect in person, it all works the same virtually. So I do it on the phone with someone, and it works the
Yeah.
same. So yeah, it's so super potent.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Um, Another question that I'm really curious to ask you about is like you built this beautiful brand, and like for me, like when I feel your energy, it's like so like flowy and just like really present, you know? And I'm just like curious for you in business if it's been like if you really operate from your intuition, or if like you're very like structured, or if you have a team that kind of helps with that piece. I mean,
Oh yeah. I used to work in film, so I come from a really visual background, and so the visuals and the branding is like really important to me. It's something like that visual identity and the energy of that, and how you show up as a visual brand is like been so important from day one. So, and it's something I really pride, and it honestly, it brings me joy, and it's part of my own creative flow. Like, I'm a really like, and I've, I'm a really creative person, and I really need that. So but I do work very intuitively in the business. I do have a team around me who will openly say that, oh shit, when Nat gets that intuitive hit of like, no, it's go time, and we're releasing this, and we're going to change this and this and this. Like, they're like, okay, because things move fast. Like, things move fast. When Nat, again, it's that, like, when Nat gets the intuitive hit, and she'll then take the action on it, then it's go time. But yeah, it is really intuitive. Hey, it's all alert, but it has definitely all been a learning journey. But I enjoy working intuitively within the business. It wouldn't, it'd be weird if I didn't do it any other day. Like, I have goals, like I will have structured goals, or I'll have like Q1 goals or Q2 goals of the things I'm bringing in. But if something comes in off the back of that, and it's like, no, we're bringing this in, and this is happening, then that's what I'll trust, and that's what I'll go to. So it's, for me, it's like the structure is really important. Like, I love structure. Hey, I'm a Virgo rising. I can be type A, and I like order, but at the same time, I'm open to be flexible within the structure. And I think that's the beauty of it, is, and a lot of intuitive businesses can kind of feel like, oh, well, because I'm an intuitive business, I should just be in like this, like, woo, flow, and unanchored and ungrounded. And so it's about, how can we be really grounded and focused in the business, but also move with flow, and move intuitively as well at the same time.
I love that so much. Yeah. And I have so much Virgo in my chart, but then also like the Pisces energy. So it's kind of like a back and forth. And so I find that like having that balance where it's not like overly structured and you're able to like allow for intuitive hits and changes and can be such a nice way of moving.
Yeah. Yeah. And just giving ourselves permission to do that, I think we can, we can get really stuck on, it's like, yeah, but this is what I said I was going to do. And and it's only like, okay, but no, like this is what's really coming through intuitively. And I was saying to this the other day someone was saying like, oh, I'm getting so many ideas for my business. Like, what do I do? How do I do this? And I said to her, I was like, the book was 3 years in the making and it only came out last year. The Doorway Activation series, which is coming out like this week, next week, is I channeled that through back in November of 2019. So you have to trust the timing of the things that want to come through, like especially in an intuitive business, because you might be able to see all the things or see what's coming through, but it's just not the right timing. And so this doorway activation was like, it wasn't ready, but now intuitively it's like, yeah, now this feels ready for the business, so now I'm going to launch it. So yeah, trust what's coming through and trust the process and the timing.
Yeah, love that so much. One other question that I had to ask you about was twin flames and soul contracts.
Oh yeah. Um where do I start? Twin flames, I really feel like in the spiritual industry we can get so freaking fixed on this twin flame stuff. I think it kind of, there's a lot of the messaging around twin flames that then like fixes people on twin flames. And so then there's this pressure that, oh, the person I need to end up with is my twin flame. It's like, really, do you really want to end up with your twin flame? Because it's actually like, it's a really hard path to follow. I think we can get really hooked on that, just as a side note.
Mm.
But soul contracts, yeah, very much. Like I just feel, within relationships, whether they're romantic or they are business relationships or whatever, when that soul contract is done, like it's done. Like it might not be forever, but that there's some kind of like clearing or healing that needs to happen between two people, or a learning or a soul contract. Like, I promise that I'm going to show you this in the next lifetime that we have together. Like, I'm going to show you this. And then once that mission is done, that person can leave your life and move on. So yeah, I really, soul contracts are potent.
Yeah, they really are. And I feel like sometimes we can get that like intuitive hit of like the soul contract is over. And yet like the emotional
Yeah.
aspect of like that connection can be so hard to part ways or to like really feel released from that, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, because the human body's like, what do you mean? Hang on a second, I'm not done with this yet. And it's like, but there's like, nope, this doesn't serve you any longer. You've come, you've done what you need to do, and that's it. And it's the same when we pass over or whatever. It's like your mission done, mission's completed, and it's now time to go back home. It's the same energy. Yeah, with those soul contracts.
yeah. Yeah. Anything that you recommend for like,
Um, um, I like to do, if I'm, it's that energy clearing. So if there's someone that you really know that the soul contract is ended, but you're still feeling like the hooks or the ties to that person and you want a full body reset, I would go and do, either go and actually have energy clearing from someone else, or imagine the person that's in front of you like with like an energy cord that runs from your solar plexus point to each other, and then call back the energy cord from their body, bringing it into your body, saying anything that you want to say to that person, but like releasing them from your energy field. Just however you feel called to release someone from your energy field. And I'm also a big release letter fan, so you write the name of the person that you want at the top of a piece of paper, of the soul contract that you want to release, and you write, I release myself from the old binds, old ties, and old contracts from this lifetime, past lifetimes, and future lifetimes. I release you. And you go and write down everything you want to say to that person. And then you go and read it out loud. So you connect to your throat chakra. So you actually connect to speaking your truth around it, like really vocalizing it, and then burn it and get rid of it, and do it that way. So yeah.
Wow.
When the body's ready to release, it will release it. But I feel like we really have to support that as a journey. And energy's potent, energy's powerful. Like, we're such energy bodies, and so we always have connections to people energetically. But when those soul contracts are done, and we want to feel like we can move on energetically, it's really potent to be able to do that.
Yeah, I love that, everything that you shared. And I do believe that like we are such energetic beings, and just being like patient and sensitive to the process, because like whatever it is, it takes time, and sometimes whatever it is that we're moving through, like we want to like be on the other side or push through, and and just being like patient. I think that practice of like writing a letter and like speaking it out loud is something that like we can connect with almost anything, and have.
Yeah, because a lot of the time we put this pressure on, like we put the potency on other people. So it's like the power's in their hands, versus it being like, oh, let me look at my emotions around that. Like, how does that make me feel? Versus it being about the other person or what they've done to you. It's actually about like acknowledging the emotions and the feelings of how that makes me feel. It's that bringing it back to vulnerability. It's back into that, like, will I allow myself to be vulnerable with myself?
1000%. Yeah.
Yeah, because we can be vulnerable with others. That's one, that's great. That's amazing. But will we allow ourselves to be vulnerable with ourselves? Because when we're vulnerable with ourselves, and we have to get really honest with ourselves, it can be pretty painful.
Yes.
It then brings out all the things. And that's where the kind of, the work begins.
And the true healing. Yeah.
And the true healing.
Yeah. Oh, Natalie, this has been such an amazing conversation. I feel like I could talk with you for
I
hours.
know. I was like, there's so much to talk about.
I want to ask you a couple of quick questions as we wrap up. Where can people go to connect with you, listen to your podcast, get your book?
Yeah. I'm on Instagram. I am Natalie Miles. My website, natalie-miles.com. The book, You Are Intuitive, Trust Your Truth, Take Back Your Power, all the places that you get your book. And the audiobook is nearly out. So there's an audio version as well. And I have these new doorway activation series, which are part of my intuitive community, where we come together and share more about the energy, and we have guest teachers and a whole community as well. So it's all on natalie-miles.com, or I am Natalie Miles on Instagram.
Amazing. Do you have any fun workshops coming up? I definitely want to.
Yeah, do you know what, the main thing I'm really working on right now, and really shifting my work towards, is this activation series, The Doorway. And I keep talking about it, but that's what I'm really being called to do. And I'm also bringing into I love sharing messages with people, and so I'm going to be doing a lot more bigger group sharing messages as well for people. So guiding people through like an activation at the start, and then sharing messages. And because what I love about these groups is that you're sharing a message to one person, but everyone that's there can take the guidance. They always bring through the right people. So we're all receiving the information that we need to receive. So that's the mission, is to do kind of some like low cost, big group things like that. So that's coming up over the next couple of months too.
Awesome. We'll definitely look out for that. I'm super excited for that. Yeah. And this has been such a pleasure connecting with you.
Thank you. It's been awesome. Thank you for your love and support.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Bye.